Dawn, by JoelHappyhil, is a combat-focused setting-agnostic tabletop RPG inspired by the many modern battle manga. That's right, you want to make your own Shounen series and have your players playing in them, you can do that with Dawn. Here's how things work. In Dawn, there's two game modes: unstructured play, which is usually for non-combat narrative scenes, and structured combat, which is exactly what it sounds like, and the player characters are built separately for each modes, with the only thing linking both sides together being your attributes, coming in body, talent, spirit, and mind. You get one primary attribute at 4, one secondary at 3, and 2 tertiary at 2 at the start. This is then used for challenge rolls, which is basically all rolls in Dawn. Challenge roll comes in 3 parts: the reward for when you succeed the roll, the risk for what happens when you fail, and of course, the challenge itself, which is represented by a number that you must get enough hits to overcome, and you gain hit by rolling a number of d6 equal to your most relevant attribute plus advantage, and count each one that get 4 or more as a hit. Any dices that roll on a 6 is counted as a critical hit, which is a hit that lets you roll another dice, and this can explode if you keep rolling 6. Challenge rolls are also used differently in the two game modes. In unstructured play, challenge roll could gain advantages from a total of one of your skills, abilities, and bonds, which can get quite high, and at the right circumstances, let you overcome even the most impossible odds, though failure might get quite narratively painful. And in structured combat, advantages can be gained through techniques or other ways, and the roll is primarily for determining amount of damage or focus, a resource used in combat only. So, now that you know the very basics of the dice mechanic here, let's talk about structured combat. In structured combat, the players, and whoever they are beating the shit out of, will be fighting in a 7x7 grid square map, which is a very interesting choice of map size. All players also have 3 action points per round, and you have a basic set of actions to use. But to do more than the basic, to make your character really stands out, you have techniques, each of which comes with 3 levels and are separated into 6 archetypes: powerhouse to beat the shit out of people, vagabond to get real fast at anything, bulwark to mitigate damage, altruist to aid your allies, disruptor to be an absolute dominatrix, and ruiner to obliterate things from afar. Most techniques basically upgrades your actions or stats. Some exchange focus for an alternative combat resources for different effects, while some use combo system, in which if you perform the mentioned action in a chain, you can get more effects out of it. Things can get very crazy if you build your character right. Most techniques are even usually named after a character archetype, so you can just quickly read through the list and pick what you want to build your character, and these stars indicate how complex a technique can be, so you can even expect how much headache managing these techniques can give you. There's also a mechanic called tension, which rise every time a round ends, or when an enemy and player character get knocked out. Yes, this thing is literally tracking the tension of the scene, and there's many uses for it for both the players and enemies, the most basic being that the finisher action gets more and more worth it to use as it deals more damage. And yes, there's literally an action called finisher that gets more devastating the higher the tension of the scene is. That's extremely thematic. Some techniques also require tension to be activated, or gain benefits that increase proportionally to the tension value. However, some enemy also benefits from this and deals more damage from it too, so it's not all good, otherwise there's no tension after all. Or maybe you want to, since if you have high guts, insert doom meme here, and guts is a stat that increase the amount of wounds you can take upon reaching 0 health before getting completely knocked out of the fight, and each time you take a wound, you get 1 influence, a meta resource that is used in both unstructured play and structured combat to bend the course of the plot. The other ways to get influence includes just not having any, get stressed out in unstructured play, this specific bond action we will talk about that later, failing some challenge rolls in unstructured play, or just performing some good role playing, a typical way to get meta resource. Why you want influence? Because it can gives you some power up, or a big temporary power up in the form of awakening to get a super mode by temporarily tier up yourself, the level equivalent here, with all that implied. However, it also robs you a whole bunch of experience needed to get to next tier, so better use it at utmost emergency, and using influence also gives you more experience when a chapter, or session, ends. Therefore, the more you take risk in Dawn, the more influence you get, and the more influence you get, the more likely that you get stronger faster, much like how Escalation works in many battle manga. But the most useful things you can do with tension is probably to reduce the influence cost to execute a duel, in which a player and an adjacent opponent get removed from the scene and move into unstructured play, and I'm gonna cut it right here and start talking to you about how things work in unstructured play. As I have mentioned before, in unstructured play, you can roll with advantage from a total of 1 of your skill, ability, and bond all at once as long as you can narratively justify them against the threats and situations you are facing. Skill is, well, your skill, which can be custom written, just try not to be too general about it, it's part of your character after all. Bond is your character relationship with another character, which means you roll higher the better your OTP is, but not just that, each time you rank up a bond, you can add a bond tag to it, which unlocks a bond action to be used with that character. This requires an influence to use, but they can be very powerful. There's even a thing called quick bond, which you can use to quickly bond with a character that you found yourself to be probably temporarily attached to, so you can do cool things with them for like 5 minutes. And finally, abilities are things your character can do that are impossible to do for a mundane person. This is created by making a sentence from the list of available words, so you can do things like, you can see ghosts as long as your life is in danger, or you can teleport yourself when you dance, or you can eat food as long as you see it. That sounds just like me. Like skills and bonds, ability has rank 2, representing how much control you have over it. You can even change your ability as your character tiers up, thereby increasing the amount of situations you can use it at. To sum it up, while Dawn might advertises itself as a combat-focused TTRPG, the reality is that both its narrative mechanic and grid-based combat are designed to fully simulate the feeling you get from reading a battle manga. You just get the full experience whether your campaign focuses more on unstructured play or structured combat, and your character can be built uniquely for both game modes too. Tying this back to dueling in structured combat, you can fully take advantage of how challenge roll works in unstructured play to potentially win against an opponent you have no chance otherwise, allowing even a support character to potentially kick some serious ass, which is often a thing that happens in battle manga when the story forgoes power level for thematic conclusion. There's also one more thing that can benefit you in unstructured play, outlooks, basically how your character is like. You gain 2 things from it: 1, favored bond actions, which are bond actions you can use by taking stress instead of spending influence, and 2, boons, which can be anything from trying to outlasting anyone else to just having a car. It really just gives more characteristic to your characters. Speaking of stress, it kinda acts like wounds in structured combat, except not really. When you fail a roll in unstructured play or would be otherwise forced to take a threat, which is when the narrator tell the player something bad is about to happen, you may take stress to count the roll as success or nullify the threat, which means even when failing a roll or dealing with a bad situation, you still has a chance to just not deal with this crap. But, you can only take stress 3 times before you get knocked out, so you might want to save up for a rainy day, especially when the narrator or the GM drops in a tense situation, basically a threat that lasts more than a single roll, like a dramatic clash against the antagonist or an impossible feat attempted in time of need, and it also uses the tension mechanic. Here, the tension becomes the challenge of all rolls done in the scene, and each roll succeeding against it increase the tension by 1. Why the hell would you want to increase the tension here? Because then when you shatter the tension, each players can gain half the tension worth of influence. The higher the tension, the higher the payoff, but if you fail a single roll, you get nothing. Once again, the more risk you take, the more influence you get, but you better calculate those odds well or you get nothing. And one last thing, I mentioned the word knocked out a lot already, and you probably have noticed that, much like in a battle manga, in Dawn, people don't really die most of the time, unless it's thematically fitting or important, and the same applied here. But, much like a battle manga, a player that got knocked down can push back up for one last attempt, but if they get knocked out again, they will be losing something permanently, so it's not a choice that should be taken lightly. And that's basically it on Dawn, a battle manga inspired TTRPG for your group to create your own setting with and to fight within it. Every part of Dawn really just screams shonen at me, at least, what I still remember of the genre, since I haven't watched any of it in a long while already. The system in Dawn really seems to play out every key aspects of a battle manga. There's even a thing called antagonist system for the narrator to create a main bad guy that affects more than just their immediate surrounding, but it's still very much in development, so if you find bits of it lacking, that might be changed in the future. Anyway, you can get it now on itch.io. That's all for now, and I will see you all next time. Hello there, if you like this video, please subscribe to my channel and click that notification bell button. If you really want to support my channel, you could visit my Patreon page, or buy me some coffee, links in the description. Anyway, have a nice day.